Welcome to 4 Quarter Lives, a podcast exploring the profound impact of longer lives and careers on everything: countries, companies, couples, and careers. I'm Avivah Wittenberg-Cox, and on this week's 4 Quarter Lives, I talk with 2 entrepreneurs tackling one of the most meaningful aspects of longevity, our legacies. Farah Baxter and Ignacio Moreno are the co-founders of Soalma, a digital platform designed to help people preserve their legacies, both practical and emotional. Their online service offers a way to organize key documents, share life stories, and create deeply personal archives for future generations. Both Farah and Ignacio came to this work through personal experiences of loss, which led them to recognize a profound gap, one they set out to solve. From navigating family estates to capturing the rich, untold stories that often disappear when loved ones die, they've built a platform that makes legacy planning accessible, seamless, and meaningful. In this episode, we explore why legacy planning is so often postponed, how technology can transform the way we preserve our stories, and why this is about far more than just end-of-life planning. It's about living more intentionally today. Join us for a conversation that might just inspire you to start your own legacy journey. Welcome, Farah Baxter and Ignacio Moreno, to 4 Quarter Lives. Delighted to have you both.
Thank you.
So you are both the founders of a new website and app called Soalma, and I'd love just for you to introduce it and explain a little bit what it does and how it works.
Sure. Before going into the what it does and how it works, I think the best way to start is the problem that we had that we're tackling, right? And for us, we both encountered this when people from our respective families passed away, and the experience that created, that gap, right, that's created from the loss. And our solution is a tool to help people plan for that and minimize that gap.
When you say gap, what do you mean?
From my perspective, it was a practical gap. We just didn't know where anything was, right? Where's the paperwork to the house? Where does this person have bank accounts? Even though there was a will and there was no family fighting, we just didn't know where anything was. And that was my challenge from a practical perspective. I know Nacho had the experience more from the emotional side.
In my case, everything started when my father passed away a few years ago. I found out really in a hard way that many things were lost and were not taken so that I could also transmit them to my own children and generations to come. So that's the why I really started thinking about this subject. I have to recognize also that working on Soalma and building up this tool has broadened a lot what I had thought about before.
When you said things were lost, what do you mean? What was lost?
I mean, for example, I am the 4th of 5 siblings, and there was one album of photographs of my dad when he was young. So only one of us could keep it for the first thing, but the most important wasn't even that, because we could take pictures of that and share them. It is that each one of those pictures hide a lot of stories on it. And in some of them, he was very young, and I couldn't even recognize which one of them was there, or if there was aunt whatever or uncle whatever. And that strikes many, many different stories that can be told, not just also about those memories, but also afterwards I thought there are so many life lessons that he has lived, because he has lived in different stages in life, different historical moments even. He was born right after the Spanish War, for example. How was life over there? Why did they take certain decisions? Why did they not? Why did they have to move? Why not? These kinds of things. He's the one that was best able to tell me, and not only those, but the previous ones over that.
I certainly share that experience of being given photo albums full of people I had no idea who they are or what their stories were or how they even related to us.
So in essence, consider it a digital vault that keeps all of life's important content, both from the practical perspective and the emotional perspective. We have guides that help the user gather the information, create the content, and then the user defines who to share that with and when, right? Whether that's during their life or even conditionally upon their passing. And that's really the interesting thing, because even though death was the big driver of this to create the product, we've realized that there's so much more. There's a huge benefit during life, just easy accessibility to information and documents for a family, for an individual during their life, or even creating the emotional content like a time capsule as well.
And when you say the emotional element, what do you mean? What are we talking about? Videos, notes, stories?
In fact, there are many different elements to one legacy. And let me put a couple of examples. I was talking before, right, about my father. I've gone a little bit further with my own children. And what am I doing right now? For example, I'm creating one legacy that is called The Wedding of Mom and Dad. And it includes a message that is addressed not only to my children, but also grandchildren. And I also speak about descendants in the future, where I explain where this family started. And I have included in that legacy the video of the wedding itself, a lot of pictures around it, and also specific videos and audios recorded to people that were important at that time. Of course, mom and dad, but also people around like the grandmother, the aunt, many people, and how they lived that moment. And that's an incredible legacy for the children. In fact, I have already shared it with them. So each one of my kids already has that, and they will be able to share it in the future. And another more specific example, I'm creating one for each one of them that is called The Day When You Were Born. Because with Soalma, you can include in each legacy all the media components that you want. So there are videos on that. In fact, I have recorded 3 of the births of my children. They were born in Brazil, and they allowed that to be made. Also some pictures and also some reflections, again, as I said before. So it allows to construct. It's not just sharing files. It is creating that live album with many different things that we can share whenever we want.
Fantastic. Before we dive into all the details of Soalma and what it offers, give me a little bit of a sense of the co-founders. Why did you start this? Why now? You're a little young. Why together? And what backgrounds are you bringing to this project, aside from obviously your personal family stories that got you motivated?
The family stories were actually what drove us to start working on this problem independently. So we had actually both started working on practical planning and emotional planning before we even met each other. And we met at an alumni event, actually, by pure coincidence, and realized we had a shared passion for this space. The other thing that was interesting was Ignacio is from Spain, but was living in the US. And while I grew up in the US, I'd always dreamed of living in Spain. So to find someone who had a shared passion for this very niche sector, let's call it, and who shared geographic interest, let's call it, that was quite a coincidence. And then we spent a lot of time getting to know each other. We hear people post on LinkedIn, oh, I met someone at an event last week or a couple weeks ago, now we're starting a company. And then what? 6 months later, they realize they don't like each other and the company goes downhill. So we spent a lot of time building this foundation to understand who's the human being across from you. What type of person are they? What type of business do they want to create? What kind of culture do they want to create? And making sure that we had that aligned. That's really why we decided to come together. And in terms of our backgrounds, right, we have had very international backgrounds. And how that impacts Soalma is this is an international problem. It's not something that's only focused on one country. And so we really wanted to create an international solution for this international problem. And our backgrounds really help with that.
Maybe you can touch on the international and cross-cultural, because I imagine there are so many different cultural attitudes to legacy, family, death, and memory.
I want also to make another point, okay? Which is how important it was to me to meet someone like Farah. And linking it to what you just said, Avivah, this is something that is universal. Okay, just for the fact of being a human being, you have this need. You have the need to know where you come from. You have the need to guess or think, or I don't know. There are so many cultures, so many beliefs. where we go, why we are here, whatever. But another point that I wanted to stand out is that Farah and I have very different family situations. For example, in the first place, I'm a man, she's a woman. I'm married with a traditional Christian background and family with 4 children. Farah doesn't have a partner. She's the unique daughter of her parents, and she's much younger than I am. So our views many, many times complement one another. If I had been developing this project alone, it would be great, but I would have probably missed a lot of things from different perspectives. It is why it's so important, not only about ourselves, but also our international background. We are people that are very much used to dealing and to understanding other ways of seeing things, other cultures. Our own business school, I always say it's the most international there is around. In my promotion, we were 300 people from 60 different countries. And there was 8% of one specific country. So that enriched the purpose of our company. And going about the purpose, I have to tell you that Soalma is a very purposeful driven company. It's not just a startup. It's not just building a solution. It's something that we have need ourselves from different perspectives, different starting points. We really want to devote ourselves to developing to the biggest extent possible.
I'll comment on one thing you mentioned right now about the different cultures. I think there is this notion that some cultures are more open to discussing this subject, some cultures are less open. And from our experience chatting with people from many different cultures, countries, geographies, etc., I've realized there's no one culture that says yes and no one culture that says no. Yet there are cultures that maybe are a little open conceptually. But when we go down to an individual level and talking about me as an individual, my life, and potentially my death at whatever point it is, just by the nature of being a human, there's this unifying factor where there's some people who really want to be organized and plan and think about this sort of stuff, where they came from, what the future is going to hold, and there are others that don't. And that is across cultures, across countries. And it's very interesting because I haven't quite yet found one culture, one community that's very gung-ho and another that's completely against it.
I'm really interested in who's the target market and who's the typical user up till now. Is it, like you, Ignacio, is it the young parent of children having watched their own parents disappear without stories? Or is it the older generation that you're targeting who might want to prepare their legacy in their later years?
I would say both of them, but the real factor here also is somehow having lived nearby the situation where someone is lost. It might be because of age, because our parents, they die. It might be because they had an accident and an unexpected thing happened that took them from life before it was expected. So it depends. There are many kind of users. I was talking to one of them last week. She's a 34-year-old woman with 3 children that her dad died playing tennis. He was 60-something. She felt that on her bones. And that's why she started more thinking about this. However, the more you use Soalma, the bigger the scope of people that might use them. And I'm going to put just an example on that one. My wife and her friends are all turning 50 this year.
It's a big moment in a woman's life. We know that.
It is a very important one. But they have this group of very good friends from school since they were 5. So the idea, and they are implementing it right now, is that for each one of their birthdays, the previous one is preparing or getting a lot of legacy videos, audios, something special that each one of them is directing to the one that is having the birthday in the near future. And they're building a legacy with all those individual videos and sharing it with the person that is going to go to their birthday. Okay, so they get that. So it's a concept absolutely different because somehow this is legacy. This is something that attracts a whole life of feelings. And they tell us, we received a message, a very funny and meaningful message from one of them saying, you should patent the expression making a Soalma, because the feelings, the emotions that arise just for the fact of creating that video for my friend is amazing. And having the idea of having this tool where you just put it up and it's going to be always available for them is amazing. And as you see, this doesn't have anything to do with death. It has to do a lot with wrapping up a lot of feelings and emotions from a lot of friends, making one legacy, and that's pure legacy too. But we're not talking about that now. That's why I say, Avivah, that what we have built, really, we learn every day different uses that we never thought of. In fact, this idea came up because we were celebrating the first friends party, and we say, why don't we do that? And they started doing it, and they're amazing and enjoying it a lot.
It's kind of like a curated memory bank that's a little bit more intentional than just your Google photo drive that your kids usually get. I imagine that family legacies and stories used to be a fairly elitist kind of hand-me-down, that only the wealthy or only those who know how to read and write, who had the time or even access to the photography. I imagine now you're just harnessing technology to kind of mass democratize legacy in a very fulsome way.
Yeah, and I think what you said about it was only for those who could read or write or those who could have access to certain things, I actually would say I would disagree. I think storytelling has been going on for generations. It doesn't have to be the written word. It can just be stories. You hear so many grandchildren, and I know this was the case for me and my grandma. She would tell me stories, and I knew all the stories, yet I would always ask for her to repeat the story, right? Because it was just enjoyable to hear it. So I think that type of storytelling and that type of legacy creation has been going on for generations. In the more recent past, let's call it the last 20, 30 years, my mom actually bought a book. This was back in the 90s that said Memories from Grandma. And it had different prompts where the person would write down the stories or the answer to those things. And we're just modernizing that. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're doing something that people have been doing for generations to come, just bringing it into the year that we live in now.
However, Farah, this is also true, or I always try to make that point that people don't usually know much about their past, because it is true that word of mouth came through the family, but it goes eventually pretty soon and much sooner than expected. Because it is not the same that I tell the stories that I heard from my mom. This is like the broken phone game. Someone says, and it's not the same what my grandfather said than what I received from my mother, from my grandfather. With Soalma, you can change that. But another point is, people usually didn't know anything about their ancestors unless they had been someone important and they were recorded in history books that were told by the people that wrote them, which might not be exactly what happened or exactly what I thought, everything like that. With Soalma, we can change that because we are much more important than we think we are for more people than we think, but most of them from our family in core and our ancestors and our descendants. That's why it is so important to keep it, to have this tool, to be able to put videos, audios, everything, so that we can not only see the written stories, but also hear the voices or see the faces and the expressions that so much tell about us.
Very nice. I should have asked you right from the outset, what does Soalma mean?
You know how I was saying we have these different backgrounds, and this is an international company from the get-go. And so when we were coming up with a name, we didn't want it to be just something in any language, right? We didn't want it to be Legacies Forever in English. We didn't want it to be the equivalent in Spanish. We wanted something that essentially didn't have meaning in any single language, but that was meaningful to us. And so we had a long period of brainstorming, lots and lots of different options. But essentially what Soalma is, or Solma, which a lot of people call it in the US or the English-speaking world, it's the combination of soul in English and alma, which means soul in Spanish. So it's really merging those two languages that we've come from. to create something that is genuinely meaningful for us, but has universal applicability.
And Aviva, we also say that with Soalma, we link lives and souls. So it has a lot with what we are. Soalma is that Farah said, that digital vault where you keep the essence. Everything that goes into Soalma is important because it's practical, important, or emotional important. And somehow it is intended to perpetuate. It's not a very English word, probably, but to perpetuate who you are, what you have been, and what you still are in those that survive you and that are your descendants.
Beautiful name, Soalma. There are other companies I know that do something in the same vein, more or less. The one I'm most familiar with is called Cake in the US. What's the difference? What's the differentiation? How did you make a distinctive offering? Or is it just a different offering in a different country?
Well, I think what Cake has done is incredible. It started a few years ago, and it's really been pioneering in the sector. I think it's one of many that offer similar solutions. I think this space is poised for a lot of growth in the next 5 or 10 years, and we are going to see a lot of players enter this market. Those that do things similar to Cake, slightly different, or completely different altogether. I think most of what I've found is these companies focus on, let's call it niche subjects or specific verticals. And it's up to the user to harness all of that and bring it together. So what we're focusing on is bringing all those varied subjects together. And we really want to focus on these two components that we've mentioned so often here, which is the emotional legacy planning and the practical. We've found a lot of companies might do one or the other or some subset. We really want to make this a comprehensive offering, not just in English and Spanish, but really a universal offering in the future.
So on the practical side, I imagine it's very country dependent. How do you do this international offering with all the different ways of administrative tasks required?
Absolutely. So yes, the different laws, jurisdictions, all of those are highly, highly varied. What we've tried to do is take away all the noise and boil it down to the bare minimum, which is thinking from the practical side. I want an inventory of my stuff, to put it in the most rudimentary way. And that is actually universal. So where is the stuff does not depend on the country, the jurisdiction, laws, or anything like that. How you allocate that is dependent. And we always advise people to speak to a lawyer or someone, an advisor, to make sure that their wishes are legally binding. We are not giving legal, financial, or medical advice. Consider us a repository to gather and store all of that pertinent information. But how you manage and how you divide those assets is, of course, geography specific. We are just trying to figure out what's the lowest common denominator on that. As we grow, as we have bigger base in different countries, we hope to add more content that's geography specific. But we understand that just understanding what's what is the first step.
And let me add something to that. Conceptually, it doesn't differ that much. And we are working on developing more and more inspirational tools on the emotional side and also on the practical side, and saying, okay, what is a will? So maybe, as Farah said, go afterwards with a lawyer or whatever for your jurisdiction or however it's going to work. But the main thing is what I have, what I want to give who. So the questions and the help that we can provide in order to start doing that and having a draft is practically the same. In that way, yes, of course, we can help, and it is our will to help people on those matters.
So you help get them thinking and be clear what their desires and intentions actually are.
It can be a great tool to use in collaboration with a lawyer. So you understand, what is it that I own? What is it that's important to me? And provide that information in an organized way to a lawyer. It's a great first step to creating any of those other documents.
You've launched recently. Tell me a little bit what you've learned since. And maybe my first kind of curiosity is, what are the biggest barriers you find people face when it comes to even starting to talk about these issues? Nobody I know ever wants to talk about death or legacy or estate planning.
Exactly. It is a taboo subject. Even when we take that word out of it, we focus on the life, right? Living your life to the fullest. The challenge is it's never a today problem. It's always something I'll do tomorrow, or I'll do it when I have more time, when the sun is shining, when something, right? Whereas with other products, if you have shoes that are uncomfortable, if you have a mattress that's uncomfortable, you get a daily reminder that you need to take action. With this, a lot of people say it's too early. And people will continue saying it's too early until it's too late. And there's never today. And that's the big challenge that we have. But there are a lot of possibilities and opportunities at the same time. But I'd say that's a big challenge, right? How do we convince people to take some time out today to get started today?
Let me add something to that too. What Farah just said is a reality. Okay, so with the model that we have built with Soalma, the tool that we have developed, we have turned around that thought of this is only useful after death, so that I don't find the right time to start because it's not me that I'm going to take the advantage of the benefits or whatever. So with Soalma, we turned that around because benefits are immediate, as we commented before. Knowing that with just one tool, you can cover also the practical, the emotional, the permanent availability, the security, the privacy, the confidentiality, and the flexibility to give access at any point in time, that really makes it attractive. And one thing that we need, and this kind of approach that we are taking too, we have several deals already with some companies that have offered this as a benefit for their employees, because it gives them a lot of peace of mind. And how do we do? Because as you know, people first don't want to talk about this, or they don't know really how much Soalma can do about them. So what we do is we create webinars within those companies that employees can just get in those webinars and they understand the value proposition in 20 minutes because we go pretty extensively. And after that, there's a pretty high number of people that really want it. This is one of the approaches that we are having in the corporate world.
Because I can imagine that one of the obstacles is trust in the supplier. And so if you go via their employer, you might be overcoming some of those trust barriers that they're willing to trust with their stories and legacies. Feeling it's some pretty sensitive information here.
And not just with employers, but our entire strategy to find the end consumer is following that same approach. So targeting companies or organizations that have clients thinking of this subject, right? So rather than tackle or target the individual, targeting organizations that they work with already. So life insurance, estate lawyers, retirement communities, to name a few. To leverage exactly what you just said is how do we build trust through that intermediary?
And that's a vastly expanding sector. So you guys are on to a big longevity economy opportunity. How do you see technology shaping the future of what it is you're trying to do? And what are you excited about seeing coming down the pipe? And is AI going to transform some of what you're working with?
I think you can't turn anywhere today without hearing about AI. And we're always eager to incorporate that into our product as well. And whatever other technology we can. We understand that people today are using technology at their fingertips all the time. For example, from an AI perspective, to incorporate AI on both the practical and the emotional side is very important. The practical side, instead of navigating a platform where it's just a conversation with an AI tool that prompts the user to answer the certain questions and systematically organizes it in a way that's seamless for them. And then on the emotional side, Nacho can talk a little bit more about incorporating AI in terms of giving prompts as well.
Mm-hmm. So one of the big problems that we all have in any aspect of life is creativity, okay? Maybe we want to do something. I want to do something really special for my daughter's 18th birthday. But I want, but I don't have that creativity. That's where we want to help a lot. That's where we want to develop, and we are working on that, AI tools that help us overcome that initial gap. It's like the blank page problem, right? It's not the same if we write some points shaping the house, son, or whatever. So it's going to be much easier for them. So you give us the idea, or we even can give you ideas based on your life situation in order to create many, many different legacies and give you the tools to overcome that initial, how do I start this? And another important aspect, though, about AI, we are going to use and we are developing the use of AI on the creation stage, but we do not do anything with AI once you put your elements in your own personal private box. Okay? We are not going to do that. And we believe also AI is to help us, to help humanize, to help make deeper human connections between generations. But there are certain things that we see around creating avatars and people that are not here will still be there. That's not reality. That is not what we are about. We are about preserving the essence of people, helping them put out everything that they are. But once you decide what you want to share, what you want to live on with that, you put it up, no one gets there.
For us, that authenticity side is really important. We want to use AI, we want to use technology, but we only want to use it when it's really improving the user experience, not just the sake of using something. And like Nacho said, making sure that the user's experience and their legacy is authentic is very, very important to us, rather than creating AI avatars and things like that.
Biggest surprise, unexpected discovery after this launch phase?
I'm linking it with what I said before. There are so many more use cases than we had thought of that I'm really amazed. I can tell you, as co-founder, I am one of the biggest users of Soalma. Every day I find new things, new uses that are really important, that really make a difference. I was just thinking, this came from last weekend. I've been asked in Spain, there's a Catholic movement that they do some spiritual retirements on a weekend. So they ask the people that participate, friends of them are asked to write letters to those people. And they are asking us to write them down on paper, give it to them, and they can see it there on time or send them through an email. I say, hey, Soalma is a perfect tool to develop these kind of things. You create that legacy with the people and you share that, and it's going to stay forever for them in their own personal boxes. It's as I say, different situations in life, and you say, hey, this is also very interesting for this thing. That's why we also feel very encouraged to continue and develop the full array of uses of Soalma.
Like Nacho said, this topic has a lot of use cases. And one thing that I would say has been surprising is when I speak to people about what we're doing, how many personal connections people have to the subject. Like you said earlier, the subject can be taboo. And so it's not exactly dinner table conversation when you're out with your friends, when you're networking, all of that. But once you start speaking to people about this subject, whether it's one-on-one or even in a small group, you kind of let the floodgates open. And the number of people that have had an experience and understand the benefit of a tool like this, or are living something where they understand the benefit, it's enormous. And so when people are thinking about this, they don't need to bottle it up inside. They're very eager to share about what happened in my family or what is happening to my family now. So that actually has been very, very surprising just how far and wide this topic stretches.
Is there often a person in each family that becomes kind of the key stakeholder in this whole exercise, or is it sort of each person contributing?
I think in different families, there typically is one person driving this type of activity, but that really depends on the family. I haven't quite yet found a common thread to say, typically this person is the driver. There is typically one, but it varies depending on the family.
I would say, Avivah, as you said, we recently launched. Even as people are creating those legacies, there's always a leader that starts doing this and that. There's always one person in the family that has all the old pictures and is building the genealogic tree and everything of that. But once those legacies are created and are shared, people have their own boxes, their own digital safe vaults. And once they realize that, hey, someone shared with me something really important, I created my own box. I have things in my received legacies, but I can do the same thing for very important things. Going back to the previous question, I was thinking another thing that a friend of mine told me that he is starting using Soalma for. He divorced. He has 2 daughters in Belgium. He lives in Spain. He doesn't have many moments of contact with them, but he wants to transmit them a lot of important things that if he takes that few times that he has to go around those subjects, it might not be the best case. But Soalma gives him the means to curate very nice, important messages with his life learnings, his things that he wants to transmit, with the additional benefit that the recipients, his daughters, will receive it on a very reflective, personal moment. Because the moments of consumption, and I don't like this word about legacies, right? But of enjoy with whatever we have been given access to, are always moments of tranquility where we can understand much better any message that someone important to us or to whom we are important wanted to transmit us.
And it may be many, many years later. I imagine many people aren't ready to or interested in all of these wonderful missives until they themselves are at an age or a stage where it becomes more relevant to their understanding.
Exactly. So another example, this real one also, a friend of mine in Washington, right before coming here, she was mother for the first time. And I told her, why don't you record yourself making a summary of all the emotions that you have lived since the day that you knew that you were pregnant until the day or the week after your daughter was born? Why? And just keep it for yourself. Maybe you don't share it yet. She's too small. But in 25, 30 years, when she becomes a mother, you will talk to her about all those things that she's going to experience, but you're going to tell her, no, wait, this is, I'm telling you from my perspective of 50, 55-year-old, but I have something for you. You show her this thing that you recorded on your own feelings, your own things, how you overcame those things. Don't you think that's really amazing?
Yes, that would be an absolutely fantastic thing to have. It requires a fair bit of discipline to get started at the right age. So
Yes.
That's exactly where we're going to conclude. How do people sign up? Where do they go? How much does it cost? What do they need to know to get started in this kind of adventure?
I think you said those keywords, get started. That is the most important step. And we encourage people to use Soalma, but the important thing is doing this type of planning. And that can be just manually writing letters and notebooks. That can be recording things on your phone. Get started is the most important phrase. So for getting started with Soalma, our website is soalma.com, SOALMA.com. Our model is a freemium model. So we do have a free plan. Anyone can sign up, no need to put in a credit card. And it gets you the basic tools you need to get started on legacy planning from both the emotional and the practical side. Once someone has a feeling of how this works and they see the value, we have premium plans as well. And it's an annual subscription. Typically, we are charging $99 for the year. So it's about $8 a month, which is not a lot. And it's an subscription. We also have longer term subscriptions to focus on better pricing. And as I mentioned before, we are really focusing on working with organizations that have clients thinking of the subject. So obviously, if we go through those organizations, clients can get better pricing or other offerings as well.
One additional thing, we are also working, Avivah, with organizations that help people in their last days or years of life. For example, we're very actively working with ALS organizations to whom and for whose families this is really, really, really important. We have talked a lot about this with many people that have lived this in their own bones. They lost someone to ALS, and they all point out how important this is to start working on this as soon as possible.
I think it's a wonderful service. I think people really, really don't subscribe enough time or effort or thinking young enough to everything about their lives. not even that many people have even the occasional journal. So yes, I think there's so many lost memories for future generations. It will be very, very interesting to see if this new technological age opens up all kinds of intergenerational legacies that we've never seen before. So best of luck to both of you. All the links in the show notes. And I, for one, have greatly enjoyed getting to know this site and will use it avidly to your great success.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Pleasure. Bye-bye. For more thinking about the impact of our 4-quarter lives, you can read my column at Forbes and subscribe to my Elderberries newsletter on Substack. Let's design lives that aren't just longer, but better.